Palestinian refugees increased by 700,000.
Killed 30 people, wounded 140. Crazy.
Massive,
This is
massive
her brother. What
terrorist
brother?
attacks.
Is there any other situation in the world where they're creating refugees as fast as they can?
Coming up here at the Israel Guys.
Welcome to the Israel Guys. We believe in a world of fake news. You ought to connect to the true and authentic stories of Israel. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that. Ring the notification bell and leave us a comment. Luke, we've got a lot to talk about, as always.
UNRWA. Do you know who UNRWA is?
UNRWA? Yeah, whatever.
UNRWA is, we call them UNRWA because they have an incredibly long name. It stands for United Nations Relief and Works Agency. And they're in Brussels this week, trying to raise $800 million.
Luke, before we get into that, can I say something? I just want, there's a little to do for everybody, because I think that's really doesn't fit their organization, the Relief Works Agency. We need to come up with something better than that. In the comments below, write us something. We need something that fits the UNRWA,
something like
UNRWA, that better matches their work, okay?
How about perpetuating Palestinian refugee?
Well, I need the same letters.
Agency.
Yeah, but I need these letters, and by the end of the show, you'll know a lot more. Luke, let's continue, but we need some comments in the description below that better define who UNRWA is with their same letters, okay? All right, good.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about who UNRWA is and how they're established in a minute, but first, you got to get a scope for what's happening here, okay? Yeah. In Brussels, they're desperately trying to raise money, almost $1 billion, because they've been desperate for money for a couple of years now, because former President Trump cut U.S. funding to them, and they were a huge donor, as we'll see. For example, during the Obama administration, U.S. gave UNRWA more than $2 billion in 8 years. Trump cut that funding, and since Biden came into office this year, the U.S. has given $318 million to UNRWA, but evidently that's not enough because they're fundraising again. During the Obama administration years, we're talking 8 years, Palestinian refugees increased by 700,000. You know what, look, I find this fascinating because 700,000 would be, there shouldn't be more than 700,000 Palestinian refugees. You know this? Right. If you just know the basic history, there's not more than 700,000 refugees to start with, because there came from a certain situation. There's about 700,000 Jewish refugees that fled Arab countries and fled all over just to get out of the persecution, right? At the same time, 1948, when this thing happened, right? And then, so what happens to the Arabs, right? Well, by the way,
so there's about that number of Arabs. There's about the same number of Jewish refugees and Arab refugees. We don't ever hear about the Jewish refugees anymore because they've, integrated, right?
Two things. We're going to get into it more. One, you shouldn't be adding refugees.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
You shouldn't have a group of refugees that increases, right? The goal is to decrease them because you resettle them.
Especially if you're the agency that's supposed to be taking care of that.
Secondly, not all Palestinian refugees are from Palestinian areas, West Bank, Gaza, Judea and Samaria, whatever, Some of them are from other countries.
So you say this is a political entity?
Okay, but we're getting into that. Okay. 700,000 refugees added during the Obama administration. That is, for the money that Obama gave UNRWA, that is $2,857 for every, basically UNRWA responded, so for every $2,800 that they got from Obama, they created a new refugee.
Yeah. You think that it actually represents people, or this is fake numbers?
UN agency that is supposed to take care of the Palestinian refugees should be decreasing that number because they should be being resettled. Okay, we're going to get into that. By the way, that's not even counting money that they got from other countries, because they've gotten a vast amount of money from the European Union and tons of other countries, right? Yeah. Their budget increased since the beginning of the Obama administration until now from $545 million to $806 million. This is why I believe that UNRWA, and by the way, we'll have the source in the description below, Palestinian Media Watch, a lot of this information, it was also in Jerusalem Post, but an extensive report by them, great information. This is why we believe that UNRWA might be the very worst thing that has ever happened to the Palestinian people. We could talk about UNRWA curriculum in their schools, okay, because they have schools that are teaching Arab children, curriculum that teaches them to hate Israel, teaches them violence. We could talk about...
encourages suicide bombings.
We could talk about terror tunnels.
Yeah.
that are in the basements of UNRWA schools in Gaza going to Israel. We could talk about UNRWA medical facilities that hide Hamas rockets and weapons. And yes, that's not a conspiracy. No. That's fact. Yeah. And it actually happened, okay? But we're not going to talk about any of that. We're going to talk about how well of a job UNRWA has done taking care of Palestinian refugees, okay?
Well, obviously, like you just said in your statement before, a organization that's dedicated to helping and decreasing the problem seems to be only be aiding in the problem and creating the problem as a political, some sort of a political entity.
Okay, you should get suspicious at this.
Yeah.
UNRWA was created and to this day only helps Palestinian refugees. There's another UN agency that helps all the other refugees in the world.
Right.
Well, red flag, okay? Okay, let's get into it. UNRWA was established in 1949 when 726,000 Arabs were placed under their care after Israel's War of Independence in 1948. Today, that number has grown to 5.7 million. And if it keeps going and nothing, and the world doesn't do something to stop this and actually help these poor Arabs that are stuck as refugees, it'll be 10 million in a few years, and it'll be even more. The UN, since they were established in 1948, they have actually refused to resettle any of these refugees, meaning, like I said, they'll be just at million. Like there's been a million added probably since the beginning of the Obama administration, just during 8 years, 700,000. Here's the thing. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees was established just a couple of months after UNRWA. They're the agency that helps the other refugees in the world. And I do mean like the rest of the world's refugees. Their goal is to actually care for refugees, but the ultimate goal is to settle them in around the world, to actually resettle them so that they're not refugees anymore. That's the goal. The UN's goal in helping refugees is to take them from refugee status, or first to just take care of them, right? But eventually take them from refugee status to non-refugee status so that they can be a normal citizen of the world, right? UNHCR, and don't get confused by the abbreviations here, they have actually, since 1950, they've helped over 50 million refugees. Guess how many UNRWA's helped? Instead of helping, they've actually created 5.7 million.
Wow.
Okay.
Luke, after people get done doing their getting the UNRWA thing figured out and what the true definition is, and get the UNRWA thing better defining who UNRWA actually is, I want them to see if there's any other case of refugees being treated like this anywhere else in the world. Is there? Right. Just a question. You guys go do your own research. I know the answer to this, but I want them to look at it. Is there any other third-generation refugee? Like, is there any other situation in the world where they're creating refugees as fast as they can? It's like a machine where they create...
Think about this. You could have a refugee, Palestinian refugee that was born 72 years ago.
Yeah.
He was born into refugee status, added to the list, and now he's 72 years old. That's not how it works. Like, that's not how it's supposed to work.
Okay, if you find anything like that, you should let me know.
Let's find out the real reason.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's not just the UN. PA Social Development Minister Ahmed Majdalani let the cat out of the bag when he told UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazarani how the PA sees UNRWA. This is an article from Al Quds on October 27th. Majdalani emphasized the necessity of protecting UNRWA not as an institution that provides services to the refugees, but rather because it is a political symbol of the refugees' right of return.
There you go.
Here's the key, okay? If you don't remember anything else, the Palestinian Authority, which is the governing authority of the Palestinian people, does not want one of the 5.7 million refugees that are under the UN UNRWA agency. They do not want one of them to actually lose their refugee status and become permanently settled as a citizen of the world. They do not want it. Why? Because they want to keep them as a miserable symbol to the rest of the world that these people have a right of return. Okay? An example. During the Syrian war, Palestinian refugees were being killed in Syria. Syrian Palestinian refugees, remember? Talked about, they're not all from here. Israel offered to allow refugees to come to PA areas, so like the West Bank, as long as they agreed to remove them from the UN refugee list. PA Chairman Mahmoud Abbas refused. Estimates say 4,000 of these refugees were killed in Syria during the war.
My gracious.
And that's because Mahmoud Abbas would rather these people be killed than that then God forbid they would be removed from the UN refugee list, because they want to keep them, like I said, as a miserable symbol to the rest of the world.
You know what I find fascinating, Luke? It almost seems like the UN, what were they created for? When are they created? Why? Every other
supposed to help people.
Yeah, they're supposed to be helping. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
but every other, what do they call it?
Resolutions. UN resolutions.
So what do they do when they get all these resolutions against Israel? How many other resolutions do they have against anybody else in the world, right? So what is their purpose?
So you have two things.
What are they doing? They got all these resolutions against Israel, and they're trying to, this is what I'm going to say.
Right.
They're trying to create a bigger problem and create more refugees. And who's the problem people behind the scene here? It's Israel. Right. Israel's the big problem person behind the scene, and they're creating a political, like get it right. Mm-hmm. It's a political situation coming against
PA refuses to allow any of these refugees to be resettled. And the UN is obviously very biased against Israel because it's like 100-1, the resolutions that they pass against Israel versus any other country in the world, right? So both of them coming from both sides.
Luke, are we saying that? Boil this question down. Are we saying that they're trying to create a Palestinian state, maybe? Maybe they're so anti-Israel at the UN that their goal is to create such an international scene with the goal of eliminating Israel and creating a Palestinian state. Correct. That sounds to me what's actually in the backdrop of this situation.
Okay, what's the answer? The question is, why keep funding an organization that has not settled one refugee in 72 years, and rather they have increased them by the millions? Why keep funding an organization that not only promotes terror and hides terrorists and weapons and rockets, but keeps refugees in misery and squalor and refuses to resettle them so that they can actually start a new life? Why keep funding a UN organization that is only dedicated to working with the Palestinian refugees when there's another UN organization that actually is successful in resettling refugees and actually helping them? And the answer is no country should be funding UNRWA. That's why Trump removed U.S. funding to UNRWA. And the organization should be permanently shut down. And then the UNHCR should take on the Palestinian refugees and resettle them in their respective countries, which brings me back to one of my original points. Yes, some of them are from other countries like Syria and Jordan.
Yeah.
They're not, maybe some of them would be resettled in Palestinian areas, but many of them would be resettled in other countries. Everything that I've seen, other countries don't want them.
Yeah, well, of course.
That also contributes to the problem.
Right. Everything that I've seen from the UNRWA organization is a political. It has nothing to do with helping the so-called Palestinian issue of the with these all the Palestinian refugees around the area. Like, okay, they're definitely not helping. The stats are all there. They need to be done away with. Fact.
That's
Case
it.
closed.
End of story.
End of story. And let the other, if we trust UN at all, let's let the actual UN organization that actually deals with all the refugees around the world take care of the problems, okay? Makes sense to me.
Right.
Why treat these like anybody different than anybody else? Enough on that, Luke. There's other big stuff happening as well. We want to cover the Raam Party. Everybody has heard about, maybe you haven't heard about, and that's a big problem. There's a Raam Party in the government of Israel that's actually very much, okay, let's just read it. The Raam supports the establishment of a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. Is that a problem? Kind of agrees actually with the current Biden administration.
By the way, the
Jerusalem,
Raam Party
capital
is
of a
an
Palestinian
Arab
state.
party that broke away from other Arab parties and joined the governing coalition for the first time in Israel's history. It
also calls for the end of the occupation and dismantling of the settlements, which you and I are both sitting in right now. It also seeks to release of Palestinian prisoners on the right of return of Palestinian refugees. Okay, This is the political format that the Raam Party exists and actually is in power in the Knesset right now. That doesn't sound like it should be. Most Israelis disagree with the fact that they're even in power right now. But okay, they were recently busted, and that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about all the other issues with this Raam Party being in the government, but we do want to talk about one issue, and the Raam was just busted recently because of its affiliation with Hamas. Is that? Ouch. That's a big ouch. To be affiliated with Hamas and be inside the Israeli government, that's kind of like a serious deal. Okay, so there was this Razi Issa. He's a senior member of the Raam Party. Also, a chairman of the General Assembly of the Islamic Movement. Now, that sounds bad, but nobody's going to think of this other. He's a member of the Shura Council. What is that? That's actually a council that elects Hamas members.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's kind of bad. And the last one that anybody thinks anything about is the CEO of the Assistance 48 Association.
Which is a
nonprofit, humanitarian
charity.
Charity, yeah.
So it sounds like a good thing.
Cool, yeah. Okay, so what's the red flag?
Until you might find out where they're sending their money.
Right, and that's the big problem. Where's the red flag come in? Well, this Issa guy, the chairman we just mentioned, got compliments from a senior Hamas official.
Another red flag.
So why would he be getting compliments?
Let's just say if you get compliments from a senior Hamas official, it should be suspicious because it would be similar to getting compliments from a senior ISIS official.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And he also goes and visits. 2019, he's in Gaza. And then, so to bring it to the political situation now, 2021, he's participating in the signing of the coalition between the new current government. This guy that we're just talking about, that's on all these boards and all this stuff, he's actually in part of this thing. And here's the report. There was a reporter at Channel 13 here in Israel, along with Odd Khan, another undercover organization that goes in and reports things like this. The reporter, what is Raisi Ahmad? This is the Ahmad is the Hamas guy. Thanking you for. This was a question to Issa. And he says, it's simple. All Gaza is grateful for our treatment of widows and orphans.
So the Assistance 48 charity is supposedly sending money to widows and orphans in Gaza, right?
All the widows and orphans of Gaza are thanking us, right? Okay, but... and then the reporter pushes him and says, widows and orphans, I can understand, but what about a senior Hamas official? What is he thanking you for?
Because
and when he was pressed on this point...
Hamas is not going to be thanking him for helping widows and orphans.
Oh, absolutely not. It has nothing to do with Hamas. They care less. He says, how should I know?
Well, he realized he got caught.
He's caught. He's totally 100% caught. The organization later actually admits that they were giving money to Hamas. Okay, so a few quick other things about the organization that's problematic, because here again, the coalition signed and they're going to give funding to this Association 38. The coalition deal agreed that they would give money to the 48 organization here to send money to the Arab entities, right? So this was going to be like the handler for the money. Problematic. So that one of the directors for the Assistance 48 Association is Azhar. Okay. Azhar. By herself, who knows? No information about her. But her brother was involved in one of the largest terrorist attacks against Israel in the Second Intifada. Killed 30 people, wounded 140.
We're talking about one of those
crazy. This is her brother. What brother? This is her family. Okay, and her husband and son are both part of this Islamic Jihad terror group.
And her brother is serving 29 life sentences in Israel.
Yeah, and this is the organization that's directly connected now with
that's the charity that's feeding widows and orphans in Gaza.
We have to mention the 6 organizations that Israel just declared as so-called charity organizations that Israel just
that have
declared
direct ties to terrorists.
Direct ties to terrorists that they just stated were terror affiliated. This organization, my gracious, it's directly connected into the government. So the finance ministry is a part of this because, as I said, once the new coalition was formed, they had to agree on financial things that were going to be with this Arab party. The Raam Party, how they were going to get finances into these Arab communities because now they're part of the government. They had to sign things and do things. So we're talking about like $10 billion. Get that straight. $10 billion over 5 years.
Wow.
This is the amount of money that's supposed to be allocated through the current budget that has been approved.
We're talking about budget coming down to the Raam Party, which parts of it come down to be distributed through this charity organization, right?
Yeah, so-called charity.
Which is run by the sister of a guy serving 29 life sentences
and husband
for killing
and son are in
30 Israelis and wounding 140 others.
In terror groups, yeah.
If you see in the paper trail yet?
Yeah, so the paper trail is pretty clear here. And let's get it. So Odd Khan, the guy who busted this whole story to start with, issued a statement saying, for the first time in the history of the state of Israel, the Israeli taxpayer is funding a terrorist organization responsible for the murder of Israelis. The state budget must not be passed in its current form and in which it injects billions into the Islamic movement. We call on all Zionist elements that are still in the coalition to stop the demonic dance and take action to rectify the situation. It's not too late. Now, this was given a while ago. State budget did pass. So now what do we do?
Leave that aside. Budget passing was a lot of people see it as a good thing because there hasn't been a budget for 3 years. But
so that was a big deal.
There's this money involved that is directly going, some of it going to Hamas.
Yeah.
But there's good news, right?
There's good news is that, okay, so obviously the Israeli government, okay, so they had to pass a budget. So what are they going to do? So they are fighting for it. Obviously, no Israeli in the courts right now and in the Knesset are wanting to fund terrorism. That's obviously not the situation. So they're trying to fight it politically. Okay, so what are you going to do? So they're going to push the budget through, and now they're going in undercover and trying to, now that this has been exposed, that the money would actually go to these organizations. Like, I'm not sitting here saying that Naftali Bennett or anybody like that is actually knowingly passing money. That's not happening. The fact that the Raam Party sits in the government is problematic, and there's these loopholes that now have to be found to make sure that the Raam Party is not supporting what they say they support.
Well,
right? The Raam Party supports Islamic parties. Like, that's who they are.
Right. And since the budget was passed, the Aid 48 organization, the charity organization that's passing money to Hamas, has been served a foreclosure order.
That's right.
So that's the good news. Other thing, good news is that Ad Khan has actually committed, they've stated publicly, we're going to monitor any, like, these transfer of funds, and we're going to make sure that no funds go to Hamas. And if they do, we will bring it to the public light and bring it to the justice system. Because obviously that's a legal thing that can't happen. And like you're saying, nobody in the government actually wants to, nobody is actually...
They're not wanting to support Hamas, obviously.
Right. So
that's the story. That's the deepest inside scoop you could possibly get. That's what's going on here in Israel. So thank God that there actually is a movement to actually get inside and try to keep this money from going to Hamas. That let's never see that. Boy, that Israeli tax dollars would actually end up in Hamas hands. That would be the most horrific thing ever. So we thank God for groups like Ad Khan that go in there and actually dig inside and track these finances to make sure that they don't end up in those places.
Guys, let us know what you think down in the comments below. Remember, you can always go to theisraelguys.com for more videos, articles, podcasts, everything, tons of content that we post there every single week. And if you believe in our work, please consider making a donation at patreon.com/theisraelguys or just at theisraelguys.com. It really helps us. It's all 100% free. So the donations that you give help to support the channel and the work that we're doing here in Israel. As always, tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening right here in the land of Israel. And subscribe. Hey, before you go, I wanted to tell you about a really special opportunity that I don't want you to miss out on. A book that I was privileged to co-author with Zach Waller called Facing Jerusalem. We just re-released it with a brand new design, publisher, everything. Super excited about it. You can find it at facingjerusalemthebook.com. But the most exciting part is we're selling the first 100 copies at 40% off. We're literally barely making any money on this because we want as many people as possible to get their hands on this book. We've actually already sold more than half that number, so there's not very many copies left at 40% off. So I want you to go to facingjerusalemthebook.com. They're already listed on sale there. You don't have to do anything, or click the link in the description below. Pick up a copy of the brand new, newly designed Facing Jerusalem today. It's all about how Christians should have a focus and an emphasis on Jerusalem in their personal faith walk. Go to facingjerusalemthebook.com to get your copy at 40% off today, but don't wait because it's only a few more copies that are going to be set at this special price. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Two quick things before you go. One, smash that subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notifications bell so you don't miss out on any more of our content. Secondly, if you want to help us produce more stories and authentic truth straight from Israel's heartland, you can do so at patreon.com/theisraelguys or at our very own website. It's theisraelguys.com. Both links are in the description below.